shot, kid. I think you got him. Good shot, kid. I think you got him.
Car games have usually been about the same thing, until Grand Theft Auto shook up the genre in the late 90s. You know, that movie they made in the 1980s that never achieved any kind of status that other car-related material like Knight Rider, The A-Team, and Back to the Future achieved. Most GTA games are known for a few things, those being stealing cars, killing cops, and dealing out some drugs. And then in GTA 3, the game goes 3D and takes on more of a Hollywood-esque approach that seems similar to that of an Italian mob movie. And then of course came the spin-offs, GTA San Andreas, and one which I believe is the best out of the series, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Of course, nothing to do with the fact it was set in the 80s. Okay, because it was set in the 80s. The game borrows very heavily from Scarface, which stars Al Pacino. The soundtrack was the best from artists such as Michael Jackson, Luther Vandross, and yes. Vice City captured the essence of the 80s perfectly, while San Andreas tried to capture the gritty approach of the 90s. It was more controversial due to the urban subculture it produced. Some would call it revolutionary, while in typical fashion, the typical Nazi media branded it as racist, sexist, and many other wonderful words ending in IST. San Andreas tried to capture the success that Vice City brought in, and it did do well. But to me, the plot of San Andreas seemed to drag on too long, and the game map was far more massive in that, and it was easy to get lost. Take it from someone who knows. And now we come to GTA 4. And what is there in this GTA that we haven't already done in previous games? Well, for starters, you get to drive cool cars just as you did before. The mood of the game's dialogue is very satirical and sarcastic, where nothing seems to be taken seriously in the radio commercials in the game whilst you are in transit. You still go out and steal cars, but then again it would be very contradictory towards its title if you didn't. The differences in this comparison to said previous titles are that this GTA seem to be taking the graphical side a little more seriously. Granted, one could be forgiven for thinking, well, it is a next-gen game, but when you consider previous titles in the series that were on the Xbox and the PlayStation 2, other car games in competition with it had a better graphics engine, although DCE will argue that a game should be based on its playing performance and not its pretty graphics engine, but unfortunately developers don't think that way these days. Yes, I know. There's also the angle of the romantic liaison Nico forms with Michelle, and most of the story when she is in it involves you driving her around on dates to go bowling, playing darts, watching poor talent acts in some rundown theatre, and going to fast food outlets. Now, I don't know about you, but I've bought this game expecting to start as I meant to go on from previous titles, and that you steal cars and learn who is pulling the strings. But I never got to that stage. You want to know why? I got tired of the tedious antics that the game had to offer with its absurd subplots that diverted you away from the main plot of the game. I traded this game in as a means of DCE getting Brawl. I think he got the better deal out of it. In my opinion, if you want a decent GTA experience, go to previous titles from the first game to Vice City. Trust me, they make more sense. And now a word from the Cat in the Hat. No, not that Cat in the Hat! This Cat in the Hat. A vengeful kitty, to whom nothing is sacred and will tear any franchise to shreds if he desires to. Anyway, here is his 2 cents on the matter.
Okay, I decided to give GTA 4 a go to see what all the fuss is about, because one rule I stand by is do not succumb to the marketing of any video game until the end result can justify it. And I can't see why it deserved the hype and everyone skipping work and college to buy and play it. Now, hate on me if you will for not having this, yay, I love everything attitude that everyone seems to embrace when a new title presents itself, but I wasn't really blown away with GTA 4. By that I mean GTA has finally jumped the shark, is now all about embracing some sort of a social aspect with the need to watch TV and go bowling. Take the opening cinematic for example. We are treated to some lengthy backstory for Nika about how he's in America, that I felt like grabbing some popcorn and picking up a control pad. I've always said video games need some sort of story to help explain things and a progression from A to B, but frankly, I wonder why this isn't a CG film. for there is so much story and cutscenes it's slowly becoming Grand Theft Fantasy starring Cloud Bellic. Now, once again, before we get off on the wrong foot here, I like GTA for allowing you to get away with things that would lead to some hard time in real life, unless you're dumb enough to copy the antics of the game and give Fox News more fuel for their ignorance. But I feel this series is trying too much to capture the reality aspect by including segments that no one in their right mind would find interesting, unless you're a fan of The Sims. I played this game for an hour and a half, but I found myself, instead of doing what I normally did in Vice and San, which is decapitating people and begin a series of hilarious drive-bys, I was in a bowling alley on a date, to which point my boredom settled in and I went off to play something more interesting. If you fill something with so much content that you cannot be bothered to play them all, then it's not worth it. It's like having a table full of food you can barely manage to get past the first 3 pies. I feel these games need some sort of an expansion pack that extends something until the sequel. And yes, I prefer Vice City also. Not for the decade aspect, because it's funnier to gun down people in god-awful clothes while listening to the Human League.
To sum up, on a scale of 1 to 10 from me, Grand Theft Auto 4 gets a very substandard 4 out of 10. Until the next issue, he has been the DCE, I am MJ Knight. Game over.
Rat-tat-tat-tat, kittens and marmalade!